Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips, your weekly resource for all challenges that are facing school leaders. As always, my name is Michael Barber, and I'll be your host today. We've got two new faces on the channel this morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are. Those are two of my colleagues. I believe on your left, you'll find Tommy Alberini, our VP of Real Estate Acquisitions. He's waving to you if you haven't caught that already. And on your right, you've got Tabatha Martins, our Director of Real Estate Management. As you can tell from the titles of my colleagues today, we're talking about facilities and tackling a bunch of conversations and questions on things like financing, improving, how to talk about lease agreements, things of that nature. So we're going to hop into a couple of questions, but I would say if you're joining us live, please feel free to hop into the comments if you've got questions on anything facilities related, and we'll tee them up for Tommy and Tabatha here. Also, just want to let you know that on Thursday, just 2 days from today, we are hosting a webinar that is tackling a bunch of topics under the conversation of facilities, and both Tommy and Tabatha will be there for that conversation. But we're going to go in depth into a bunch of conversations and topics on Thursday. I will drop that link in the chat in just a moment. But let's hop right in. As you know, at Tuesday Tips, it's 10 minutes, usually about 10 minutes. And we'll take it from there. Tommy, first question to you, my friend. What financing options exist for schools looking to build or improve their facilities?
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me on. So I'll start. We offer two pretty carefully crafted products: a money to buy product, as well as a money to run product, both of which can provide the capital your school needs to improve your existing facility or build new. Outside of that, there are obviously the more conventional routes. A formal kind of lender can obviously participate in capital needs to address facility expansions, but usually, the parameters are a little stricter around the underlying collateral.
And question for you, there's obviously a ton of complexities that goes into navigating whether you're going bank loan, bond, whether you're going, our product as it relates to facilities financing or other options that are also out there. Can you talk about a little bit about how schools can navigate the complexities from a timing perspective for all of those options and what they should be thinking about?
Yes, specifically relating to facilities projects, I would kind of boil it down to three underlying points. Number one, I make sure that you procure a qualified project management team to help support you from concept all the way through to completion of the project. It's really important to have industry specific experts in the room to help guide you through what those individuals do on a day-to-day basis to help you focus on what you do, which is operate your school. Number two, be realistic about your cost budget as well as your project schedule. Don't always go with the cheapest resources. You get a bunch of bids and you see, this is the most cost-effective solution, and it fits within budget. Let's go with that, because you might end up paying for that on the back end. Make sure you have a really realistic budget, and you ultimately refer to the experts in the room to help you develop that budget. And number three is start the process earlier than you think. It's always a complex project whenever you have any sort of construction or tenant improvements or any project related elements in a facilities finance deal. You have a lot of elements to work through, and for a lot of schools, it might be the first or second or third iteration of that project. So just make sure you start early, give yourself enough time and runway to actually get your project done within a reasonable time frame.
Tabatha, I see you leaning into the camera. Anything to add there?
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. The most you can plan in advance and make sure you have the time to manage all the project the best for all the schools and for everyone.
Yeah, I feel like when we have conversations with school leaders, one of the biggest challenges is always getting around their expectations of timing.
Yes.
Because especially post-COVID, although construction timelines and certainly supply chains have normalized a little bit, but timing, especially when you're thinking ground up development or whether you're doing new construction or whether you're augmenting a building you've got existing already. Timing just seems to be a huge challenge that school leaders are facing when it comes to the amount of time they think it's going to take versus what the market can make happen. So the thing that I've learned from conversations with our team is you've got to start having these conversations related to a new facility or adding to your facility. The sooner, the better, because they can be extremely complex projects that take an enormous amount of time and involve hundreds of parties to get these things done.
Absolutely.
Speaking of
Absolutely.
complexities and considerations related to financing buildings, Tommy, for you, are there specific considerations for charter schools when exploring the different financing options you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are several, but I would argue that affordability is paramount. So basically, how comfortably can you, as the school operator, afford the cost to operate your facility with your planned future enrollment? So that means short-term enrollment, midterm enrollment, long-term enrollment. What your projections look like should ultimately dictate how much you can afford in terms of a facility's occupancy cost. And to add to that, I would say in order to best address this element, it's critical to engage a mission-aligned partner that can synthesize your corresponding projected financials into a sustainable facility solution for the school. Other kind of high-level considerations might be, are you on a path to ownership of your facility? And what kind of benefits do you qualify for along the way that might help offset your facility's costs? So examples might be access to additional capital reserves to address repairs and maintenance items. Oh, I need a re-roof in 10 years and I don't have the reserves for that mounting year over year. What kind of access to capital do I have to address those types of repairs? Other examples might be grants or donations that you might qualify for, or growth flexibility if you have follow-on phased expansions that you'd like to pursue. So those are just a few, but some of the big ones.
Yeah, certainly one that you touched on that we talk about a lot on here is enrollment marketing and how important that is from an underwriting perspective as you're thinking about getting financing for either construction or acquiring a new facility. And I often have conversations with school leaders that think of enrollment just from a seasonal perspective, right? I need to fill for the school year or at certain points through the school year. And especially when you're having a conversation about your facility, how important it is for whether it's a bank or a partner like us or a variety of partners that are out there, they all look at what's the growth curve of the school and how do you support that curve, because that's going to help maintain the long-term life of your school. So such good considerations there. One last question for you, Tommy, and I'm going to turn it over to Tabatha for a couple that I want to ask her related to leases. When you think of financing decisions and how they impact two things, the sustainability of the school and the success of the school over the long term, what are some things that you have to consider there when you're picking different financing opportunities for schools?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. I would say, given the percent of your total revenue that ultimately goes toward the cost to occupy a physical facility, at times that's up to 20%. In some markets, it's over 20%. But in either case, it's a handsome sum to pay towards the facility cost. I think that, facility-specific financing decisions can have a huge impact on your school's long-term sustainability and overall success. So it's really important to take the time in selecting a partner that takes your projected performance into account when sizing and engineering your facility plan such that it ultimately is sustainable from a long-term perspective. We see a lot of, more kind of conventional players in the space that or access to, capital, kind of additional financing partners that don't emphasize the school's operation as the core of the ultimate facility plan. So when you look at, I don't know, just in a vacuum, today's scenario of whatever the school's affordability looks like, it might not be the same as 2 to 5 to 10 years from now. So looking at the entire picture can be really helpful, but it takes someone who understands, a P&L at the school level such that they can ultimately project out 40 plus years and get you on your path to owning that facility one day.
Yeah, such important points there. And whereas Tommy's team deals largely with acquiring properties and constructing and developing those, Tabatha's team works with a lot of our school leaders on ensuring that those schools stay healthy. And as a part of that is all of the leasing considerations when it comes to their school. So let's talk about leases and specifically related to schools, facilities, Tabatha. What are the key factors schools should consider when negotiating a lease with a facilities partner?
There are a lot of things to consider, but I would say the four most biggest for me that the schools need to consider. One is location, size, and space requirements that the school needs. So as Tommy was mentioned, like if they want to look for a short term and long term, what the plans are to use those facilities for, right? So we can better support the students' needs at that space. Second will be the lease term and the renewal options that you might have for that lease. So how long you want to stay on that space, and it's always good to have set in stone already the renewal options beforehand when you first sign the lease with the landlord, because that will eventually come to place one day, and that can avoid further negotiation. So as soon as you have that in the lease, the better. Also, as Tommy was mentioned about affordability, that is very important to look for rent amount and escalation. So make sure it's affordable for you, and not just for the short term, but look and forecast your rent increase for the next 5 and 10 years or 20 years, and make sure that aligns with your expectations so we don't have financial strains in the short term. And also, I think the most important is to watch out for tenant rights and responsibilities. So look to the lease and see if you understand who is responsible for what, especially regarding maintenance and repairs of the building. So that is a big item, and also operation expense.
Question for maybe both of you, just because you both touched on, and this is the affordability factor. I'm going to throw a question your way related to, as when we consider whether we're leasing a property, whether we're renting a property as an individual or buying a property, there's obviously financial consultants that tell you how much you should be spending, percentage of your total that you make every single year, right? And I know this answer is going to vary state to state, but on the affordability question for a school, is there a percentage range, whether you're deciding to finance with a bank, or whether you're leasing with a different third party, or whether you're going to the bond market? What's the percentage range that school leaders should be expecting to see from affordability perspective, the cost of their monthly payment that they're making towards their building? What does that range look like?
That can vary, but I think Tommy touched a little bit about that, and should stay around, I would suggest, between like 5 to 25%, because the big expense that all schools have is the salary and the expense with the payroll, right? And that takes normally like 60 to 80% of your expense. So you want to avoid to stay more than 20% just in the rent and the facility, so you avoid to have like problems and issue with affordability moving forward.
Got it. Tommy, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I guess the only thing I would add is we also look at rent coverage, which is a multiple as opposed to a percentage. So there are many metrics that you can look at. Obviously, the industry uses several, but gauging both rent coverage, which is, just how many times your existing rent can you afford with your net income before rent, in addition to the percentage of your rent or your facility cost relative to your total revenue. So those two elements can usually shake out more or less what your affordability will look like. Some markets, New York City real estate is going to cost a lot more on rent to revenue percentage basis than a suburban market in, say, the Carolinas. So that's ultimately something we take into consideration as we run both on the asset management side, also on the initial money to buy side.
Got it. And for all of us following along that maybe don't understand all the terms, I'm going to drop a link into the chat in just a second. We've got a glossary of terms related to facilities financing. So if you're, whether it's rent coverage or percentage of lease, et cetera, or percentage of your operating capital against that monthly lease payment, I'll drop that in there if you can download that guide, and it's got all the all those key terms defined. Last question, because we're hitting the 15-minute mark here, to Tabatha. Obviously, schools have unique needs when it comes to the facilities that serves them. You think of a STEM program that needs certain science and technology room. You think of a music or arts-focused school that needs certain types of facilities to serve those needs as a school. What do schools do what can they do to maximize their lease agreements when it comes to the unique features of their school?
Absolutely. So I think prepare yourself and negotiate the terms that align with the future needs. So if that school or that space that you're looking right now doesn't have, for example, a gym or a multi-purpose room, or as a art schools, they need to have a theater or something like that, make sure you account for that in the long term to add and expand in that facility that you're looking for. And also look for like duration of the lease, the building space that you have, parking space, that is a big item, and flexible terms that aligns with the school needs want. And also I will always encourage to maintain an open communication with the landlord. So if that facility doesn't meet your needs right now, maybe you can discuss that if you want to expand in that current facility or not, and what your terms, and actually address your concerns and issues and what you're looking for to serve better your students.
Yeah, such good considerations there, especially on the landlord side. Finding a landlord you can have those open and honest conversations with is very important. And certainly someone that gets charter schools or schools in general is going to have a much different point of view than maybe a traditional landlord of a different type of building. Tommy and Tabatha, that's it for us today. We would normally keep these to 10 minutes. We've gone to 15. Just want to say a quick thank you to the both of you for joining us. And we'll have both Tommy and Tabatha and a few more members of our team, along with a school leader, joining us on Thursday for a webinar that's going to do a deeper dive into these topics. So we hope you'll join us there. I'll drop that in the chat as we finish up today. Other than that, I'm just going to say a quick thank you to both of you again for joining us on Tuesday Tips. We'll be back next week with another 10-minute conversation on challenges facing school leaders. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.